Hey everyone, and welcome to the Ncast. I'm Guy Weissmantel, your host and Executive Vice President of Marketing here at Ncontracts. In this podcast, our subject matter experts from across the company will be talking with industry thought leaders about relevant topics and trends in compliance and risk management for financial institutions. You'll learn the latest tips and tools to manage risk in this ever-changing environment. Let's get started.
Hello, this is Michael Carpenter, Vice President, Risk Management here at Ncontracts, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Theresa Mann, Vice President, Chief Risk Officer at NASA Federal Credit Union. How are you, Theresa?
I'm good, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Again, excited to speak with you about just really risk management in general in our short time, and got some questions put together. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to go ahead and start asking.
Absolutely. Let's get started.
Okay. So I know a little bit about you between your LinkedIn profile, and I had the chance to meet with you one time. I know that you've got a little bit of a diverse background, and so while your career hasn't been in credit unions, or has been in credit unions, excuse me, your focus actually always wasn't in risk management. So tell us how you got here and how your past experiences have influenced your views and your approach in risk management.
I have been a CEO I was prior to coming to NASA Federal as CEO for about 29 years. And while my direct experience wasn't in risk management proper, as you know, being a CEO, you are always responsible for risk management. So I've been in risk management for my whole career, really. But in 2019, my credit union, the Partnership Federal Credit Union, merged into NASA Federal Credit Union. We were about 150 million in assets, and we were a credit union. We were a single sponsor credit union. We were the FDIC credit union once upon a time. And as the FDIC credit union, I had the privilege to work with many board members, supervisory committee members who were former examiners, former regulators. And then we, as a single sponsor credit union, merged in 3 additional credit unions throughout my time at the partnership. We changed our name to the partnership and merged in 3 credit unions. One of the groups we merged in were Fannie Mae. And so I also had the privilege to work with professionals from Fannie Mae. And so I really got most of my risk management exposure and education from those people. Right. Those people taught me in my career how to manage risk, not to avoid it, but to manage it. Right. So that was my experience there. Now, as a CEO, I was of a relatively small credit union when we started. When I started at FDIC, it was about 50 million in assets. And when we merged into NASA in 2019, we were about 150 million in assets. And so not a lot of difference in that size range. Really, I was somebody who worked with people at all levels of the organization, working with the tellers, working with the loan officers, working in accounting, did marketing, managed people, worked in human resources. I worked with the board of directors. I worked with external auditors. I worked with external examiners, full gambit. And so what I think has helped really prepare me for the role here at NASA Federal is the operational responsibility combined with the strategic and governance responsibility and experience, right? And so that together helps me to take the leap from where I was as the CEO of a credit union to a vice president and chief risk officer at a larger institution. So I've been at NASA Federal since October of 2019, and we immediately, within 5 months, had to deal with the pandemic. So really just got sort of thrown into the fire, if you will, and had to deal with all of that. And so now we're gotten used to that over a period of time, and I've been able to spend some time actually building and evolving our risk management program here.
Yeah, and just thinking about you being a CEO and thinking about all those sources of knowledge, like you said, and partnering with previous examiners on your board, how often does that happen? And so my next question, it's really going to really parlay really well into it. do you find there is resistance to continuous risk assessment? And if there is, if you find that, how do you combat that to create a culture where people are risk assessing all the time?
Yeah. Well, I think in all of the time that I've been in credit unions, sure, operational people are always conflicted with how much time they are capable of providing to audits and assessments, right? Always, because their responsibility is production, right? And they're held accountable for that. So in my entire career, I can say that I frequently have come up upon friction, right, in those areas, the responsibility. And most of the time as a CEO, I was sort of I was the person in the middle that was trying to make both sides happy, right? So that experience, brings me here where it's no different, of course. I mean, people are always trying to find the balance, right? So no matter what size institution you're at, you're always looking for the balance of how to balance providing service to the members and managing risk, right? And so I feel like it's the responsibility of risk management to help to, first of all, to respect what operations is responsible for doing, right? So we have to understand their responsibilities and respect their time. And so to that extent, we need to create the types of risk assessments that are minimally invasive and provide maximum effectiveness, which is not easy. And when we do that, as we do that, we can help to educate operations and the people who are the recipients of these risk assessments in the importance of, the fact that we have to do them, we just have no choice, right? Because our regulators are not going to be letting up on that anytime soon. So I think our responsibility to help educate and to help support them in those efforts, and then they can, we can work together. They can help us to understand the reality of their stress points, right? So we just start to work together, and that's how we're doing it here.
Yeah. Okay. Bonus question here. Just as you were talking and thinking about, again, like it's really kind of this creating this snowball of the understanding kind of where you've come from and what you're dealing with and what you're working on continually now. This ongoing risk assessment. Is there anything that you found has helped get buy-in from the operational area? And just to cut, maybe a couple ideas here. Are you sharing more information or information with them differently than maybe in a way that makes them want to buy in? Or are we finding more efficient ways to get information, not heavily impacting their main goal?
Yeah, I think this is sort of in some of the other questions that I think you'll be asking is about my commitment to communication, right? So what we have done in risk management as we're continuing to evolve the ERM program here at NASA is to ensure that we're communicating with people and helping them to understand why it is important that we're doing what we're doing, right? And so we're creating a consultative risk management business unit. And so we're going to try to help them to the extent that we can. We're going to do as much for them as we possibly can, but ultimately we need some time, right? So we're going to make it as easy as possible for them to provide the information to us so that we can help get things done as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you. So let's get a little more specific on some risk management methodology. We're going to bring in 3 lines of defense, or now, of course, if we're going to get real specific, the defense aspect has been dropped in just 3 lines of risk management, just 3 lines. But in that 3 lines model, right, however people are comfortable with calling it nowadays, that is the gold standard for financial institutions to manage risk. How do organizations build a structure that ensures that you have all the 3 lines and that all 3 lines are being represented? And then lastly, how do you ensure good communication and collaboration amongst the 3 lines? A lot of question there, if you can unpack that.
Yeah. Well, I think similar to the question I just answered, right? So it's about, in my opinion, it's about communication, right? It's about effectively setting up the system that works for your institution, right? So here at NASA Federal, we've looked at the 3 lines model and we concur with it, we agree with it. And we've set up our structure so that everybody is in one of those 3 lines. Some people are kind of hovering over 2 lines and sometimes 3, right? We've diagrammed it. We've set which roles are in which line, and we've tried to clarify those roles, right? And then try to connect the dots between how those roles work together. So a great example is we have created visual workflows. Like policies and procedures are great, but I found that visual workflow diagrams work really well. They help individuals to understand where they fit within a particular function, right? And how they need to work with another group or another individual, and when their role is important, right? And when they come back into the function. So if you take the 3 lines, excuse me, and you look at the people that are in the first line, the operational specialists, and the people that are in the second line, which are typically the risk management folks, and then you draw the diagram of a typical risk function like vendor management or regulatory compliance, right? And you draw the diagram, and then you bring everybody to the table and you say, look, here's what we're going to do, here's what you're going to do, here's where we're going to intersect, here's how we're going to communicate, right? And then everybody seems to understand what their role is, because no matter what, everybody in the organization is responsible for risk management. There's no question about it, right? If you're in the first line, we want to help you to understand how do you monitor, how do you manage, how do you identify risk, how do you mitigate that risk, how do you mitigate it right then and there? You don't need to wait for a meeting with us. You can just say, hey, you know what, there's a loophole there and I need to figure out how to fix that. I need to fix that gap, right? So that's really important. So we're sort of always teaching and always learning from each other. And then the second line, we've created we're calling it, we're building the bridge, if you will, between second and first line. So what are some ways that we're building the bridge? We have a compliance committee. So we've created this compliance committee that is run by the compliance specialist. Again, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for everybody in the organization to help us with this responsibility. So we create this compliance committee, and then we bring in all of the first line specialists from people from every business unit in the organization. And we invite them to the table and we talk about their role specifically in helping to implement regulatory compliance changes, or required policy changes, or required curriculum, compliance curriculum that we have to be accountable for, or any complaints that specific to their organization, if we have, or to their business unit, if we have some trending in some of our complaints, right? So we bring them in, and then we help them to fulfill that compliance role, right? But they have to be accountable for getting some of it done. And so that's how we're bridging between the 2 lines. And then regarding third line, I think that's the hardest thing for most organizations, right? Because depending on size, it's really hard to have that separate audit function. But I think to the extent that you can separate or segregate those duties, it's really important. And there's some other ways to do that. Like we do some of it. We do some outsourcing, and we've tried to separate that person responsible for internal audit from any other operational risk functions. And so we collaborate very much with internal audit. We have to. It connects solidly with risk assessments. Risk assessments help to influence our internal audit plan. Internal audit helps to justify the risk assessment ratings, right? So you have to collaborate really closely together, but as much as we can, we try to separate that out.
Yeah, such a strong relationship there in the third line, but you're right, not always met with open arms and with favor almost, But one of the things I picked up, Theresa, that you were saying, and I love it, is when you think about communication, I almost heard rethinking, right? Rethinking the method of communication. I love the visual workflows, right? It's not just here's the formal published doctrine of who does what when, but because that's not always easy to put together, right?
Yeah.
People's minds can't get around it. So it's great to hear that communication is definitely is key. You hear about it, but it's more than, well, it's important. That's one thing, I guess.
Yeah.
You got some sponsorship, you got some awareness, but then bringing it together visually, it sounds great.
Well, the visual can also,
yeah.
Michael, sorry, the visual can also test out the procedures, right? Because if you write these procedures and you think that that's how things are getting done, and then what happens is you start to evaluate and you realize, well, they're not really following the procedures. This is what they're doing. And that's okay, because this is working just fine. So why don't we just document it the way that it works for the organization? And then we'll go back around to the procedures and say, here's the way that we need to do it.
You know, there's a whole other Ncast here on this very important topic of procedure as a control. And then now you're adding visual and so many things, but I'm having to kind of pull the reins internally for myself to get to the next question, but very good. Talking about risk and then opportunity. So where is the sweet spot between risk and opportunity, and how do you know when you're there?
Okay, so I was thinking about this question, and this is the way that I've approached it, right? So I hope this is the intention of the question. Okay. So when you think about taking advantage of opportunities, right? We should be, as responsible, I don't know, CEOs, risk management professionals, responsible people in an organization, leadership in an organization, we should be doing proper due diligence before we get ourselves involved or take any particular type of opportunity, right? And so here at NASA Federal, what we've looked at is what are the questions, the proper questions that you need to ask yourself when identifying the inherent risk in an opportunity. Because there are tons of them. There are so many risks involved in any opportunity. And then from those inherent risks, how are you going to resolve those? Are you going to accept those risks? And what controls are you going to put in place to help mitigate those risks so that you can feel really good about taking that opportunity, right? And so to that extent, that's how I'm answering this question about the sweet spot, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
in my opinion, the sweet spot is at that point when your organization is effectively assessing the risk of any new opportunity, that they no longer have the lost opportunity cost because they had to not move forward with something that they weren't prepared to move forward with, or they moved forward with something and they didn't really assess the risk and now they're going to take a loss from it. So I think it's when the sweet spot is when you've found that balance and you're better able to assess that risk before you take a leap, or as importantly, before you say no to that opportunity, because that's where the lost opportunity cost could come in.
I definitely appreciate the fact that it's like, okay, where are we looking at this from? Because like every other topic in risk management, it's like put a different lens on, put a different pair of glasses on, and we're having a different discussion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because we're like, wait a minute, are we talking about risk and being at a certain level, like, 0, 100 scale? And then if we found like, well, we thought it would be 40, but here we are at 20, is this an opportunity to take more? And that's a different discussion. I like this discussion where it's like, well, are we even doing the work before we get into anything? Because then, and that's actually from a linear perspective, that is most important first. Do the work up front. And, it's like more of the, don't just play follower, right? Be your own leader. Think strategically, understand what you expect to gain. And then with that understanding, you could look, you can do your periodic checks and say, compared to what we thought winning looks like, we're doing well. But if you don't do that, then you wouldn't know, and you wouldn't know if you had an opportunity, and you couldn't do risk and reward analysis and all those things. So again, probably another Ncast just on,
well,
just on that topic.
Also, the regulators are starting when they come in and you've got a new program that you installed. They want to see where is your documented due diligence that you did prior to moving in? And now that you've been in it for 6 months or a year, where is your risk assessment that confirms or denies, that you have effective controls in place? They're asking those questions here. So if you don't have that, if you don't, and I think it's good, because what it means is that we're all going to be doing our due diligence upfront, which is what we should be doing.
It really, to me, is strong business process. Unfortunately, when we have these conversations, it usually comes in on the regulatory ride. It's not coming in on, let's be great at business.
Right.
Let's do something with our members' money and do it in a way that we're confident and we have kind of an eyes wide open approach. No, instead, unfortunately, it is on the risk bus. It's not.
But you don't have to just ride the risk bus, right? You can actually jump on intentionally, right? With this and say, you know what, there's a reason for this. You got to be careful, because obviously it can be very, it can, cause a lot of conflict in the organization. So you want to do it properly. You can't just always do it as much as the regulators would like for you to do it. But I think riding that risk bus with purpose and intention proactively can help you to identify early on what is in the best interest of your organization and your members, rather than being a follower and just running along behind it and saying, oh, now we have to do it. We don't have time to think.
Yeah, everybody offers this product, so I guess now we are. Everybody does it this way, so I guess now we do. Right. So being a risk officer, and again, it seems like you've always been a risk officer. We all are, right? And of course, when you have the seat of CEO, you really, like you talked about earlier, you got to kind of be a little bit of everything. You got to have an awareness of everything, not just that. Yeah, we have that role here, but like the needs and the intention and the hurdles and all those things. And so this next question is recognizing that you've always been a risk officer, but before this role, what's something you wish somebody had told you before you took on formally Chief Risk Officer?
That it would, I don't really think there's anything I wish anybody would have told me, but I think what I'm most surprised by is that it is so much like what I was doing before. Right. I was coming on and thinking, oh, I'll never be able to do this. I don't have any experience in risk management. How am I going to do this effectively? How am I going to manage all these people? And then I realized it's exactly what I've been doing this whole time. Like all of the experiences that I've had in all of the areas, whether it be with the board of directors and the governance perspective as the CEO over the whole organization, in mergers and acquisitions, whether it was on the, my job when I first started in credit unions on the teller line or in the loan department, or, when we rebuilt our website, everything, all of it was important and impactful to helping me to do my best work here. And that's what I think I was the most surprised at, is that all of that experience would help make me a better Chief Risk Officer.
I love that answer. Not expecting that answer. That's why I love it. Okay, so last question. I could talk to you for hours on the topic, and it's been a pleasure. But here's the last question.
Okay.
And I don't even know how you're going to do this, because you've said so many things that are helpful, but what words of advice do you have for somebody that's new to risk management? You might repeat some things, this is the culmination, I guess, of our conversation. What's your advice to a new risk manager?
Okay. Well, I have said this already in our conversation, but I think it bears repeating. I believe that it is the responsibility of a risk management business unit to help improve communication in the entire organization, to support enhanced communication in the entire organization. And I think that it is not something that we think about when we think about risk management, right? So you think about people with lots of certifications and letters after their name, right? And so when I was going to take this job, a lot of people said to me, well, are you going to go get certified? Or are you going to go take this job? You're going to take take this certification test, you're going to take this course. And I will tell you that the most important, those are all super important to have. And the people that I know here that have certifications and that study and that they're so smart and they have such an impact on the organization by having the specializations in risk management. However, I have not seen any risk management classes that explain the importance of communication and the importance of not only being able to communicate effectively, to build relationships and to tell stories, right? And so you have to take a lot of data that you go and assess. You assess the risk. You look at the compliance. You do the compliance risk assessments. You have the internal audits. You have all kinds of information. You have to take that data and not just give people reports, but actually determine the story that those reports tell and communicate that story effectively to all levels of the organization, whether it's up to the CEO and the board of directors and the people responsible for risk oversight, or whether it's sideways or down to all of the people who run and manage the business units and the operational specialists. You have to be able to communicate effectively. That is so, so, so important in any role really in the organization, but especially in risk management. And so whether it's somebody who wants to become a risk management professional, or whether it's somebody who's a risk management leader who's going to be building a risk management team, I know I would say here when I hire people, I look at their capability of effective communication. And I think that is just so underrated in the world of risk management.
Wow. That's a great response. So it's not just about a colorful graphic or widget. I mean, the audience needs to understand why it's important. What are they looking at?
That's right.
What they should consider, right?
That's
we
right.
rely on our executive management and our board to challenge us. Really, right? We really rely on them. And if they don't know the story, then maybe they won't even understand how they can apply the information in their businesses.
Right. Oh, they could miss something super important if you're just giving them a report. You have to be able to summarize that report and tell them, what do you see in that report? Why should they pay attention to that? Or why should they, give it a low risk rating, risk the profile's low risk, or the profile should be high risk. You have to be able to communicate that.
Oh man. Yeah, this is great. Again, I hate that our time has come to an end today for the Ncast, but I hope we can talk again soon. And, Theresa, good luck to you and, and all of the endeavors that you take on at NASA Federal Credit Union.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's good talking to you.
Hey everyone, that wraps up another great episode of the Ncast, where we are able to talk with people on the front lines of risk and compliance across the financial services industry. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a review. And if you're not subscribed yet, we invite you to do so on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.